Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another ITY video with top Australian executives. Today I have Garry Duursma. He is the Head of Market Development and Innovation at MasterCard. Welcome to the program.
G'day, Alex.
Thank you for joining me. Now, as everyone knows, MasterCard is a financial company, credit card company. They work with financial institutions to offer credit and debit cards. I've got a debit MasterCard myself. 2 or 3 years ago, I got it with the NFC at last, and now I've been enjoying contactless payments. It's a great thing. My bank took its time to get me the card, but they're finally on the program, and here we go. Now, we're going to talk about it in more detail, but contactless payments have grown dramatically in Australia, much more so than in the US. And we even have smartphones now that are integrating the contactless payments and certain brands. So what have been MasterCard's developments in this area throughout 2016?
Sure. Look, I'd like to, answer the question to start with by just addressing one point you made. There's MasterCard as being a credit card company. These days, the business that we're in is far more a technology business than it is a pure credit business. In fact, the way that our business runs, where we work with partner banks that do the issuing, the credit decisions are really made there, and the business that we are in is really providing the technology that supports the network. As payments become increasingly digital, moving away from what was traditionally an electronic payment to a digital and a more intelligent payment, that's really the core business for MasterCard these days.
Sure. And I mean, technology, it's ever more infiltrated into our lives, and
absolutely.
And I guess you guys are staying on top of it as much as possible in a world of lots of competition too.
Absolutely. So that we have to differentiate ourselves, and we have to do more intelligent things, and we have to do things that benefits all of the stakeholders in the ecosystem in payments. A classic example.
Yeah, please.
Some of the things that we're doing there is, for instance, our Smart Cities initiative. Around our Smart Cities initiative, we're attempting to help government better operate intelligent cities on a global basis, and certainly we have a practice for that here in Australia.
And what would be some more around the smart cities that you've been doing overseas or even here? Some examples of where it's all working together. Okay,
so for instance, some of the things that we're doing to try and bring together all of the technology capabilities of MasterCard with the payment capabilities that are inherent in the business is that in any, for instance, transport system, there is around about 2 peaks, right? You've got a 10-minute peak in the morning, you've got a 10-minute peak in the afternoon. And the transit systems have to be structured such that they can cope with those 2 peaks. An incredible capital expenditure necessary to be able to deal with those 2 peaks. But if a city can shift those peaks, either 10 minutes to the left or 10 minutes to the right, and start to smooth out some of these incredibly spiky peaks, you're in a position to start to delay major capital infrastructure to expand the capacity of the networks. And that adds real dollars back to a city.
And might that be around giving incentives to travel a few minutes earlier or later?
Absolutely. So, for instance, one of the complexities that most organisations, most governments have, has to do with the fact that fare policy is a pretty sensitive matter. It's a political matter.
Nobody wants their fares to go up.
Absolutely, right. So what you've got to do is you've got to work out other ways to start to encourage people to behave in ways that will allow you to extend the life of the infrastructure. One of the things that MasterCard is doing is using its loyalty capability, and we've recently purchased a major loyalty organisation, and we use that capability to help transport authorities start to shift the peaks a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right, and it results in being able to delay those big capex for sometimes a couple of years. And in big cities, the New Yorks and Mumbai's of the world, that can be $150 million in a saving for a capex that's delayed by a couple of years. A city like Sydney, for argument's sake, it would be quite reasonable to expect that there could be a $75 million saving out of being able to shift the peaks to the left and to the right just out of loyalty. So you need to combine a payment capability, an open loop payment capability, with a loyalty capability, and then you're in a position to do some of these really clever things which benefits the government and ultimately all Australians.
Yeah, well, let's not forget the people aspect. If you're shifting the peak and spreading it, that's going to make for happier people because you've got less of that demand right at that peak moment, and there's empty capacity on either side or more capacity, and if you could just shift it around, redistribute it in a fair way, that makes happier travellers.
Absolutely. So it's a multiple benefit basically for this Smart Cities initiative. And then there's also an environmental benefit as well, because if you start to automate some of the things that go on in cities, for instance, a basic function of being able to identify where a parking spot might be, you can reduce the number of people that are circling endlessly looking for parking spots.
Haven't we all done that?
You bet.
Yeah. And there's also the talk about the Opal system for public transport in New South Wales. changing so that you can use the Opal card, but you'll be able to use credit and debit cards sometime later this year or next year, which is also taking advantage of those contactless payments.
Yeah, very important announcement by the New South Wales government to start with, where they're intending to run open loop payments. Essentially, it means that you use your contactless MasterCard to tap on and contactless MasterCard to tap off, like you would an Opal. So you don't have to worry about recharging that.
Yeah, it's just your regular card. Yeah, I've got an Opal card, but I would just love to use my contactless MasterCard. It'd be great.
Yeah, think of all the circumstances where tourists come to Sydney, for argument's sake, and they don't have an Opal card, they don't understand how to use it. Yeah. But it's
they know how to use their card.
They know how to use the card.
And they just talked about today about having single-use Opal cards, which is 20% more expensive. Well, you wouldn't need to do that if you could just use your credit or debit card. It would just work.
Yeah. You increase the consumption of a public good, which is a transit system. You make it a more efficient system, and you actually reduce the cost of collections as well.
Sure.
We've seen from other cities that open loop transit, so the ability to tap on and then to tap off with a contactless MasterCard, pretty much halves the cost of fare collection. And we know that fare collections in most sophisticated urban transit systems is probably 15% of the take.
Yeah.
That's an incredible saving that you can generate with open loop. So we're really excited about that announcement from government, and we hope to be able to play an important part to bring that to reality.
Yeah. Now, amongst all the talk of smart cities and contactless payments, and it's growing, of course, we've also had lots of talks about security and hacking and safety. And so what are the things that you've been doing in this space to make sure that all these systems are secure? Okay,
so look, first point I'd like to make, though, is we've recently seen a little bit of press around contactless security and security and potential frauds around that. I should say that first of all, credit card fraud in Australia is noticeably lower than many other countries in the world. Generally speaking, we're in a good place because some time ago we went down the track of deploying a chip-based technology. And what that means is that the bad guys started to look for softer targets, quite frankly, and there are other countries that are softer targets from that perspective.
So haven't implemented the chip, they're still relying upon the magnetic stripe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, so we're already at a relatively low level of fraud in this country, and the lowest of our low level of fraud, in fact, out of all of this very small fraud that we have, only 2% of this very small number really relates to contactless fraud as well.
And so how are they doing that in a nutshell, without giving the bad guys any ideas?
Well, what I could do is I tell you a bit about how we protect it.
Sure. Well, that gives us the answer anyway, I'm sure.
Yep. A contactless transaction has a number of elements of data that's transferred. There is obviously some basic card information. So first of all, the contactless card shakes hands with the terminal. It says, are you a real terminal? Yep. Are you a real card? Yes. And there's some high-level public keys that are exchanged to make that happen. Then after that, there's an exchange of the card data information. There's exchange of some dynamic information, which is only known to the bank. And there's also a transaction counter, which prevents a replay fraud happening later on.
Someone's trying to somehow record that and then run the same thing again.
Exactly. Yeah. So by the time you combine all of these measures together, you end up with a really, really secure mechanism for making payments. In fact, I would argue more secure than even a chip-based contact style transaction. So there are far easier ways for the bad guys to get that basic information, which some people feel that can be used, but certainly that's not an issue in this country. It's an extremely safe and an extremely secure way to make a payment, and ultimately, if something really does go wrong, if you lose your card, for instance, and somebody picks up that card and uses it for one or two transactions before...
Which are the ones under the $100 limit before you have to start typing in your PIN.
If that happens, then you're still protected by the 100% protection, so the liability protection from MasterCard. So from that perspective, you will not be responsible for those transactions which were conducted once the card has been reported lost or stolen, or even just before lost and stolen. So you're in a great place, 100% protection there. And we make sure that the card is very safe and very secure.
And no doubt, I mean, your scientists and engineers are, evaluating as many different security scenarios as possible and continuously improving them.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So security is an ongoing journey, and it needs to continue to progress because the bad guys are constantly looking for ways to break things. We used to, a long time ago, look for passwords, for instance, that were things that you could remember. We've also moved to things, for instance, that you have, for argument's sake, that might allow you to authenticate a transaction. But these days, we're recognising that remembering stuff is very difficult, and forcing people to change their password on a regular basis to remember new passwords is fraught with difficulty. So we're actually looking to progress the ultimate authentication, which is who you are. And we think that the way forward with that is biometric, quite frankly, so facial recognition. And you might have seen MasterCard ID check, for argument's sake, an announcement that we've made quite recently in the market.
Tell us a bit about that, just briefly.
Okay, so essentially what we're doing is we're not so much interested in whether or not you can remember the password or whether you've got a particular asset that might allow you to be identified. What we're looking to do is be able to just recognise you by face. So I've got a demonstration.
Sure.
If
Let's
you
have a look,
like to see
please.
it. Let's see if I can. It's always risky to bring up a demonstration here in mid-flight, but we'll see how we go.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So what I have here is on my smartphone here, I have a purchase here. I'm going to make a $49 purchase from the gadget shop.
From this mythical gadget shop, yeah.
So I'm going to hit the buy now button. That
There's
takes me
the ID
to
check.
MasterCard ID check.
Yeah.
And it's saying, first of all, confirm that in fact this transaction is one that you want to make for $49.
Sure.
So, yep, it's a $49 transaction. And then I'm being offered a facial recognition screen. So I'll just turn my back, please excuse me, as I make that. And by blinking, which is my proof of life, I'm just going to line it up.
We can see the red thing around there and the big tick.
And the big tick.
Yeah.
So
the blinking is obviously so someone doesn't just hold up a photograph.
Exactly. So the point of the blink is to make sure proof of life, essentially.
So that was facial recognition, and then you were wanted to show the other biometric
so there's
too.
also biometric within that same capability, but I've just closed the application. So now
that's right. You've got to find it again.
Bring it up.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so
just wait for you to show it on screen.
We're going back to the same purchase, so please excuse me while we do a second selfie page, just in case you didn't get it the first time.
Sure, yeah.
So I'll line it up, do a picture.
Blink.
Hang on, there we go.
Okay, so yeah.
It's a little bit off to the side.
That's
so
all right. No, we
I'm
still saw it. We still saw it.
I'm trying to do it in relation to the camera.
Sure.
Okay, so now sometimes a transaction might prove to be a particularly low value transaction. This next one, for argument's sake, is only a $29 product.
Yeah.
So perhaps under those circumstances, you'd be happy with perhaps a quicker or simpler form of authentication. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll go to ID check. We're verifying a $29.99 transaction. I hit OK, but now I'm using my biometric.
Just your thumbprint or your fingerprint.
Just a thumbprint in this case.
And then you've got a really high transaction. You want to do both.
Okay, because sometimes it's a big dollar value, and you want to be absolutely certain. So under those circumstances, we'll go to this gadget shop again, and we're buying a $399 iPad.
This
Air.
will protect you if someone knocks you out and they've got your thumbprint, but they can't make you blink.
Your eyes will be shut.
That's it.
Okay, so by hitting OK, it takes you to the ID check page. We're hitting $399, verifying that transaction.
Yeah.
So now I've got to demonstrate it. Take the picture
Yeah,
again.
you can see that.
So there's my picture.
Yeah, it's got the round circle going there, and now it's asking you for your thumbprint as well.
Just double check that you're all good with this with an ID check by the authentication, and the transaction's approved.
Excellent. Yep. There we go.
So now we're moving away from those difficult circumstances where you're expected to remember a password that rolls, and you have to try and remember the birth date of your third puppy.
Yeah, that's right.
It's extremely difficult to do. People get it wrong, but it's very hard not to get your biometric right.
And it's also a way that the tech support person on the other end gets fooled, because the person pleads ignorance or begs that you somehow help them, and you've just helped the bad guy who was doing social engineering of that person. So it's more difficult for that to happen when you are the key. And so, what are some of the other global trends or Australian trends that you want to mention, just if you haven't already? Okay. Just in the whole space.
Look, I think it's probably the connected nature of the Australian marketplace. Yeah. There are we think about 5 billion devices connected to the internet today.
Yeah.
That's
the Internet of Things, really, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
And depending on whose statistics you listen to, you will find that those connected things are going to grow between 25 to possibly even 40 billion by 2025. There you go.
Yeah.
It's getting bigger every day.
Yeah.
Pretty much any device that you have is starting to become a software-based device, and it's starting to get a degree of intelligence in it. And what that's leading to then is that each of those devices is going to become a connected device for initiating payments.
Yeah.
So we envisage a world, and we see that Australia will lead in this vision, where a large number of things connected to the internet will be the source of transactions. And so, for instance, it's completely feasible that in the not too distant future you will drive up to the petrol station and your car will have a tokenized credit number or card number in it, so that you can fill up, it recognises your vehicle, and you can just drive off without having to visit the store if you so choose.
Sure.
It's completely expected for, and you will have seen already, that card numbers are being installed in rings and key fobs, sometimes items of clothing. All of these things are starting to become the initiation point for payments.
Yep.
And in fact, even your fridge is starting to become a point by which you make transactional, you initiate transactions.
Well, that's right. I mean, you announced at CES with Samsung that you had an integrated app letting consumers shop from 2 online supermarkets via their connected Samsung fridges. So, any word on when this will come to Australia with one of the big, one of the supermarket triopoly?
Look, it's a really, really interesting space, and we think that online, or what we today call online, is really a point where we think great growth will occur is in the grocery space, particularly around the staples, the thing that people don't necessarily enjoy going shopping for their toilet paper, for argument's sake.
They just want it to arrive, on a regular basis.
Exactly. So we see a connected world, and certainly the fridge, a connected home, I should say, and certainly the fridge as being the initiation point for that connected home.
Have you got one of these fridges in Australia that you've been testing, or is it all really happening overseas at the moment?
At the moment, it's still slightly north of here in Singapore.
Yeah.
But in the not too distant future, we anticipate that it be here. Keep your household inventory in the application on the fridge. It will start to plan menus for you, identify what needs to be eaten based on what's going to reach its use-by date. And when you get short on staples, the fridge will then place the order on your behalf, or you can place special orders, and of course those groceries arrive through the shipment service, thus reducing the need for you to travel to the supermarket for the things that you'd rather not go for.
Yeah, well, I look forward to seeing that demo in Australia when you and Samsung or whoever it might be are ready to show it off locally. Now, I'm imagining that you can't divulge any secret talks you might be having, but I mean, is MasterCard, globally chatting with Apple or Samsung or Google or any of the smartphone people on integrating the MasterCard into their phone payment systems?
Well, MasterCard is already in market with all of the brands that you've just mentioned in at least one country throughout the world. So you could safely conclude that we are very close to and doing lots of work with our global digital giants.
We just have to wait for local announcements from the local banks.
Absolutely.
Well, I look forward to those too.
But the key point, I guess, from a MasterCard perspective is that we need to provide underlying technology that allows this to happen. And as it turns out, the underlying technology that allows you to take a card number today, one of those 16-digit card numbers that you see on a piece of plastic, which is probably in your wallet today, and then turn that into a stream of ones and zeros in a digital payment is called tokenization.
And that's also where the numbers that get sent are different to the numbers that are on your card to protect that in case it ever gets hacked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So essentially what happens through this service, if you like, this technology service that MasterCard provides, is that you will request a token number, so an alternative 16-digit number, and we store a relationship between that 16-digit number that you really have, the one that the bank knows, and the one that we put into your device. So next time you initiate a payment, for argument's sake, from your smartphone, that tokenized number comes back into the network, and also other pieces of information like the hardware ID comes back into the network.
To know that that's the one you registered with and it's not some other one.
Exactly. So unless that token comes back from your specific hardware ID number, plus other pieces of data to make it very secure, it's a useless piece of data. So that gives us the opportunity now to store your tokenized card number in a large number of devices and do that very safely and create very convenient payment mechanisms. And it's that same underlying technology that's being used by the big smartphone providers in order to deliver smartphone NFC-based payments and the digital wallets that we see.
Sure.
Also the underlying technology that we see from the major banks in Australia that allow them to deliver their own wallets.
Which they've been doing for a couple of years now, long before Apple Pay and Samsung Pay and Google Pay have arrived on the scene.
In fact, the very first host card emulation, so if you like cloud-based payments, were conducted in this country. So I'm very proud of the fact that Australia has been on the leading edge of that for some time.
Well, that's a good segue to my next question, which is, which country do you think is the most advanced when it comes to contactless payments?
Well, I'm very proud to say that Australia is still way out in front of pretty much every other country. So we're in excess of 70% of all card payments now in Australia are contactless and made contactless. And we see it increasing the number of electronic payments, and we see with cash withdrawals from ATMs declining as well, or the growth rate certainly is declining. So Australia is certainly probably the most advanced country in the world around contactless payments.
Yeah.
It's interesting for me as a MasterCard person to have our visiting executives come and visit when they don't always have a contactless card in their pocket. They come from countries sometimes that are not as advanced.
Yeah, well, like the US, for example, it's still a land of signing for everything. I was only there recently, and it's like, you guys are so behind. And they said, well, nothing we can do about it. It's expensive to change, but they're changing slowly. America's catching up. But,
they are.
With 10 times the population of Australia or more, it's a lot of terminals to
There's
replace.
A lot to upgrade there.
Yeah.
But look, it's interesting for me because they come to Australia and they hand over their card sometimes for a transaction, and they are amused to find that the retailer, shopkeeper, or the taxi driver automatically taps the transaction and going, there's something wrong with your card.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's how quickly we take things for granted.
Yeah.
Now, earlier this year, MasterCard launched its Girls for Tech initiative, the STEM program, Science, Technology, Engineering and Math.
Yep.
This was a program with 5 and 6-year-old girls at Redlands Junior School.
Year 5 and 6.
Year 5 and 6, year 5 and 6. So how did that go? And when will you be holding more Girls for Tech programs across Australia?
Look, it was an outstanding success for us. So we had 40 or 50, I think it was now, MasterCard employees who assisted in that program to bring it to life. And essentially what we're trying to do is to get a degree of interest from girls in that specific age group who are underrepresented in technology. There's a talent pool that we're just not getting access to, and that's something that we want to fix. It's part of MasterCard's view around social inclusion. In some countries, we specifically focus on the underbanked and try and bring them solutions to bring them into the banking system and then bring them into the payment system and actually connect them to the global economy. In this country, those initiatives are not necessarily quite so relevant. So what we're trying to do to make sure that we achieve the social inclusion goals that we have is programs like Girls for Tech. And we'll be running it again this year as well.
Excellent,
And we see some great successes out of that already. It's obviously too early to see where some of the participants have gone, but just the change in attitudes, particularly around STEM subjects, from our side of things has been very gratifying, and we'll be continuing that.
Excellent. Now, let's take the chance to look into the crystal ball and look at the future. They talk about contactless payments becoming, ubiquitous. But if we look 10 years down the track, I mean, will cash no longer be king? What do you see in that space? Once a decade or more has elapsed.
Okay, so I would suggest that in a decade, or actually in even a shorter time frame, it would be somewhat unusual that a bank would issue you a piece of plastic. When you apply for a payment instrument, a MasterCard, what would be more likely to happen is that you would be issued a token, a virtual card, if you want, that becomes embedded into your primary device. It could be your watch, it could be your smartphone device, it could be
electronic glasses or something,
electronic glasses,
whatever it might be.
And I think in 10 years' time, you might find that it is more common that you would be making a transaction from a digital device than you would from a plastic device.
You think some bold people will want to have something implanted?
Well, we've already seen some extremely sort of leading edge individuals decide to inject chips into their body and make payments that way. I'm not sure that particular one's for me.
No, but you never know. I mean, the young kids, they love to do all sorts of crazy things, so you never know. Just might be the new trend.
Yeah. But I guess in that 10-year horizon, even in the 5-year horizon, I imagine an environment where payments really are digital by default.
And we're seeing that now with things like Uber or GoCatch or other apps where you put your credit card in there once and everything else is just done through the app. I mean, it's just digital, as you say.
Absolutely. The challenge with that type of environment today is to move from what we say is almost an analog payment, which is the equivalent of putting that 16-digit personal account number into a browser, for argument's sake, and a truly digital payment. So a payment that comes back into the system with a token, first of all, and that token comes with a hardware ID and maybe also an application ID that allows us to create an extremely secure transaction and one that is much more difficult to perpetrate a fraudulent transaction with.
I mean, I would imagine we're sort of seeing that already with Apple Pay on the web, as was demonstrated at the Worldwide Developers Conference, where you use your hardware device with a MasterCard or some other card pre-programmed in, and you just put your fingerprint on the phone, and it, instead of a PayPal payment or some other credit card payment, it's paid that way, tokenized, as you say. I mean, that's clearly, as what you're saying, it'll become much more common, and with from a lot more providers than just Apple.
Absolutely. So very good point, right? So what's happening now is that these digital giants and MasterCard indeed itself is
also a digital giant.
Also a digital giant is creating an environment where you can do a digital payment instead of an online payment. So you can think of an environment, so let me paint this picture for you. You can think of an environment today where there's been terminals in the market for 30 or 40 years, right? And the format has been roughly the same, although it's been upgraded and extensible all the way through. It started off with a pretty basic electronic data capture machine where you're swiping a card. And over a period of time, it was upgraded to be able to be capable of handling a chip, and ultimately was upgraded again, and it was capable of an NFC or near-field communication. Contactless payment. The bleep, that's right. So, but each time a consumer understood how to interact with it, and you didn't necessarily need to completely retrain the marketplace. They just understood how they could move through their payments world or their payments life using that payment device, that payment terminal. When you think about it, no such equivalent exists in the online world today. So MasterCard is all about creating that online acceptance mark that gives you that same functionality as the payment terminal in the physical world, but create that in the digital world. And for us, the basis of that is our MasterPass technology. So where that step up that you described before, where your smartphone has a capability to be able to be the point through which you authenticate for that transaction, that capability is going to come to our marketplace with MasterPass. So it's an extremely important initiative for us to bring that to market from both a wallet perspective, but even more so from a global acceptance perspective. You can use that acceptance mark in over 250,000 devices, 250,000 sites today, and we need to continue the growth of MasterPass acceptance and use that as the digital acceptance mark that we then grow upon and ultimately develop upon for digital acceptance and make that as pervasive as terminal acceptance.
I mean, when you've got various countries in Africa where the mobile phone has supplanted wired networks, and banking is done even on 2G handsets with SMS.
Feature phones, they're called.
Feature phones, as they call them. That's right. That all those countries and people are slowly being upgraded to even just basic Android 3G smartphones, and there's nothing stopping your technology being in those, and people authenticating payments that way. And some of those countries might even happen even faster than here, depending on I guess the level of technology in those different countries.
Very true.
So I always like to ask as we get to the very end of our interview, if you could please share the best piece of advice that you've ever received to help you get where you are today.
Well, look, I would suggest that probably business and anything you do in a business world is really a team effort. And from that perspective, it's about choosing the right members of the team. And if you want to be successful, you really need to think about your own strengths, and it's a matter of, if you like, soaring with your strengths. You've got to surround yourself with the people who are able to compensate for perhaps things that you're not particularly good at, and allow you to accelerate the things that you are good at. So it's a matter of soaring with your strengths in that way. And when we have a team here at MasterCard focusing on emerging and digital payments, and it's all about making sure that you spend actually the most of your time with the best possible team performers, because they're the ones that can deliver a step up of capability for the team. Many managers, I think, spend a lot of time at the bottom end of the performance curve. The yield, if you want, for the time invested there is much lower than what you can achieve at the top of the performance curve. So that was some advice I got some time ago, and I've certainly tried to live by that.
Well, thank you very much for sharing it. So, do you have any final messages for IT Wire viewers and readers and for your current and future customers?
Look, it's an exciting time in payments. It's a really exciting time because of digital payments particularly, and many things that we know and have become quite familiar with in payments, I think will evolve and merge into digital payments in future. So I look forward to the world of what will be billions of connected devices and many initiation points for payments. And for me, that's an exciting time. It's a great time to be in the payments business.
Gary, thank you very much. I wish you best of success for the future, and I hope we can talk again.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.